It was the afternoon of October 11th, 2016. A middle-aged man named Carlos Herrera Sr. walked into the visitation area of a prison in Venezuela. The room looked more like a beat-up high school cafeteria than a place where inmates met their families, rows of worn-out plastic chairs, aluminum tables, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. But Carlos wasn't here for a routine visit. He was here for answers. At one of those tables sat a man who looked like he had crawled out of a nightmare. The prisoner's cheeks were sunken in his arms wrapped in stained bandages, one eye swollen shut. And as Carlos stepped closer, he noticed something else. The guards, normally cold, unmoved, statuesque, shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking toward the exit. They didn't want to be in this room right now, not while this conversation was about to happen. Carlos knew why. For the past month, this prison had become hell on earth. A full-blown riot had broken out, led by one of the most feared inmates in the country, a man named Dorangel El Comediante Vargas. This gang didn't just fight back. They took over. Guards were overpowered, some killed. For a month, Vargas and his men controlled everything behind these walls. Carlos had followed it all on the news. But this wasn't just another headline to him. His son, Juan Jr., was locked up in this prison, and during the height of the chaos, he vanished. Carlos had called everyone he could think of, prison officials, lawyers, even politicians. But no one could tell him where his son was. They just said, "We'll look into it." No one ever did. Until finally, this one prisoner, the battered man sitting across from him, now agreed to speak. He said he knew what happened to Juan Jr., so Carlos sat down. And after a brief exchange of names, he leaned in and asked the only question that mattered. "Please, tell me, what happened to my son?" But instead of answering, the prisoner started talking about someone else entirely. Dorangel Vargas. Carlos tried to stay patient as the man rambled on. He explained that Vargas during the riot wasn't just brutal. He was calculating. He didn't just want control. He ran the place like a twisted kingdom. Food was scarce, the guards were powerless, and inmates were starting to starve. Vargas made sure his subjects had what they needed. Barely. And if anyone challenged him, the prisoner said, pointing to his broken ribs and stitched arms, "This is what they got." Or worse. Carlos gripped the edge of the table. "So, is that what happened to my son? Did Vargas beat him?" The man shook his head slowly. "No," he said, voice breaking. "What happened to your son was much worse." Carlos froze. His breathing went shallow. The man explained. During the peak of the riot, Vargas tapped Juan Jr. for a special task. Maybe he volunteered. Maybe he was forced. It didn't matter. In Vargas's world, refusal wasn't an option. Saying no could mean being fed to the dogs or worse. The task, distribute food, that didn't sound so bad at first. But then came the twist. Juan wasn't being asked to pass out the food. He was the food. Carlos blinked, not sure he'd heard right. The prisoner looked him dead in the eye. Vargas and his gang had beaten Juan Jr. to death, butchered his body, and fed him piece by piece to the other starving inmates. Carlos recoiled, mouth open, eyes wide. No breath, no movement. It was one of those moments where time just collapsed. And the worst part, the inmates didn't even know what they were eating. As the prisoner finished his story, Carlos pushed away from the table, stunned. This wasn't just a murder. This was a horror show, and his son, his own blood, was the centerpiece. He didn't waste time. Carlos went public immediately. He held a press conference, gave interviews, demanded justice. He told the world what had happened in that prison, that his son had been turned into a meal during a month-long reign of terror, that there were eyewitnesses, that there were survivors who could testify, but the Venezuelan government denied it completely, said there was no evidence of cannibalism, no official charges were filed. Vargas is still in prison today, still breathing, never charged in connection with Juan Jr.'s death. Carlos never got justice, but he did give the world something else, a story so gruesome, so unreal, no one who heard it could ever forget it. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what's discovered, it's how it's discovered. On a humid summer night in 2014, 15-year-old Erin Vincent left her house in small-town Indiana. She said she was going to a sleepover at her best friend's place, something she'd done a dozen times before. She packed a backpack, hugged her mom goodbye, and walked out the door. That was the last time anyone saw her. At first, it didn't raise alarm. Erin had a habit of staying an extra day with friends without checking in. Her mom, Debbie, figured she'd just come back the next day. But when 24 hours passed, then 48, then 3 days, reality set in. Debbie called the friend's family. They said Erin had never arrived. She'd never made it to the sleepover. The police were called, flares printed, search parties formed. The woods behind the Vincent home were combed for days. Every shed, storm drain, and mile of railroad track was inspected. But nothing turned up. No phone, no clothes, no Erin. After a few weeks, the trail went cold. Investigators quietly moved on. But Debbie didn't. She kept pushing. She'd drive around the outskirts of town, post on forums, ask truckers at gas stations if they'd seen a girl who looked like her daughter. And then, almost 7 years later, Debbie got a phone call. It was a local real estate agent named Travis. He was helping clean out an old foreclosed farmhouse about 30 minutes outside of town. One of the workers there had found something in the crawl space. At first, it looked like an animal skeleton, but then they saw the bracelet. It was silver, slightly rusted, and engraved with the name Erin. Authorities were called in. The remains were removed for forensic analysis. DNA confirmed it. It was Erin. The room where she was found had no furniture, no windows, just a dirt floor and wood beams wrapped in old electrical cords. What little clothing remained showed signs of distress, scratches, tearing, and a single bloodstain under the collar. Next to her body was a small notebook, water-damaged and mostly illegible, except for one haunting phrase scratched repeatedly into the last page. I thought I could trust him. The public went wild. Everyone wanted to know who was him. The police questioned Travis and the previous property owner. Nothing stuck. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no cameras. But a deeper investigation revealed something disturbing. 5 years before Erin disappeared, another teenage girl, Amy Ballantyne, had gone missing from a town just 40 miles away. She was also walking to a friend's house. She was also never seen again. And just like Erin, she had worn a silver bracelet engraved with her name. Police reopened the Ballantyne case. But that one, too, was stone cold, until a retired school counselor stepped forward. She said she recognized both girls. They had once been part of the same after-school program years ago, and they'd both been mentored by the same adult volunteer, a quiet, soft-spoken man named Doug Krieger. Doug had no criminal record, no red flags, lived alone, worked part-time as a local handyman. But when detectives showed up at his property, he was gone, completely. Inside his home, they found something unsettling: Polaroid photos of teenage girls. None graphic, just candid. Girls walking home, at school events, in line at grocery stores. Aaron and Amy were among them, but there were other faces too, at least 8. None of those girls had ever been reported missing. Not yet. Doug Krieger has never been found. No arrests have been made, but most people in that town believe he's out there somewhere, still watching, still waiting. And as for Erin's case, the file remains open, unsolved. But that one line in her notebook, it's become a warning that echoes through every parent in that town. I thought I could trust him. In 2001, an American couple, Kevin and Melissa Greer, left their Colorado home for a weekend camping trip in British Columbia. They were seasoned hikers, comfortable with the wild, smart about safety, and eager to explore a place called Deadman's Valley. Locals always joked about the name. It came from an old story, something about gold rush miners who vanished in the 1800s, but no one took it seriously anymore. At least, not until Kevin and Melissa went missing. They crossed the Canadian border on a Friday, and by Sunday evening they were expected back. But when Monday came with no word, Kevin's brother reported them missing. A cross-border search began almost immediately. The couple's car was found near a logging road deep in the forest. Inside were 2 backpacks, a map, an empty water bottle, and Melissa's camera. That camera turned out to be the key. The last photo on the roll was strange. It showed Kevin standing in a clearing, looking up into the trees. His face was confused, not afraid, but puzzled, like he was hearing something faint and trying to make sense of it. Behind him, half obscured by trees, was what looked like a structure, but not a cabin. And not a tent. It was square, concrete, like a bunker. Search teams focused their efforts in that area, trying to match the tree line in the background. After a week, they found it. It wasn't on any map. No GPS coordinates had it listed. It looked like it had been buried long ago with thick brush covering most of the roof and walls. The entrance was a rusted steel door set into the hillside. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The bunker had one long hallway with 3 small rooms. No lights, no power, but evidence of life-old canned food, a cot-moldy blankets, empty water jugs. And deep in the last room, searchers found something chilling. A human handprint on the wall. Too small to be Kevin's, and too fresh to be from years ago. But the couple wasn't there. No blood, no signs of struggle, just a feeling that the place hadn't been empty for long. 2 days later, a new discovery. 5 miles north of the bunker, searchers found Melissa. She was alive. Barely. She'd collapsed by a stream, dehydrated and starving, with scratches all over her legs. She couldn't speak at first. When she finally did, her words were disjointed, like she was dreaming. She kept saying the same thing: "Don't follow the hum." Melissa was taken to a hospital. Over the course of a week, she started to recover, and slowly her story came out. According to her, Kevin had found the bunker while they were hiking. He'd heard a strange, low-pitched hum, almost like electricity, and followed it. She said he was drawn to it, almost hypnotized. She followed him in. They stayed the night. But in the morning, Kevin was gone. She searched for him, called out, waited, but he never came back. Then one night she heard the hum again, this time from inside the bunker. She followed it and saw a figure. But it wasn't Kevin. It was something else. She wouldn't say what. Melissa was discharged 2 weeks later and immediately moved out of state. She never gave another interview. And Kevin, he was never found. But here's the eerie part. In the 20 years since 3 other hikers have gone missing in Dead Man's Valley, all within a 10-mile radius of that same bunker, and in each case the only clue ever found was a camera. Every final photo showed the same thing. Someone standing still, looking up confused toward the trees.